Commander Zethkar's arms trembled as he gripped the edges of the tactical display. The Galactic Alliance fleet was getting destroyed. Ship after ship disappeared from the holographic projection, each loss representing thousands of lives. The Devourers had come from a void between galaxies, and nothing could stop them. "Sir, the 7th Fleet just went dark," his communications officer reported, her voice barely hiding the fear. The reptilian officer's scales had turned pale, a sign of extreme stress among her species. Zethkar closed all 6 of his eyes for a moment. They had tried everything. Energy weapons bounced off the Devourer's ships like rain off stone. Kinetic projectiles simply passed through them, as if they weren't there. Even the Alliance's most advanced quantum torpedoes had no effect. "Pull back all remaining forces to the sanctuary systems," Zethkar ordered. "We need to buy time for civilian evacuations." "But, sir," his tactical officer protested, "if we retreat now, billions will die." "Billions will die anyway," Zethkar replied bitterly. "At least this way, some might survive." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of failing shields and distant explosions. Everyone knew this was the end. The Galactic Alliance, which had maintained peace among 1,000 species for 10,000 years, would fall within days. "Wait!" the sensor operator suddenly called out. "I'm detecting something strange." "More Devourer ships?" Zethkar asked, though he already knew the answer. "What else could it be?" "No, sir, I don't know what it is. The readings don't match anything in our database." The operator's tentacles danced across his console, trying to make sense of the data. "It's coming from the dead zone." Everyone on the bridge froze. The dead zone was a region of space that had been quarantined for millennia. Ancient warnings, older than the Alliance itself, marked its borders. No ship that entered ever returned. Most species had legends about it. Stories passed down through generations about the terrible fate that awaited anyone foolish enough to venture there. "That's impossible," the navigation officer said. "Nothing can survive in the dead zone. The radiation levels alone would kill any known life form." But the sensors didn't lie. Something was coming out of the dead zone, and it was moving fast. Very fast. Faster than anything the Alliance had ever built. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," the communications officer announced, her voice shaking. It's an ancient standard." Ancient Standard was a dead language, used only in the oldest historical texts. No one had spoken it for thousands of years. "Put it through the translator," Zethkar ordered. The message came through, crackling with static. "This is Captain Sarah Chun of the Terran Expeditionary Force. We've been monitoring your situation. Help is on the way." The bridge erupted in confusion. Terran? That was impossible. Terrans were myths, legends told to younglings to teach them about the dangers of unchecked aggression. According to the stories, they had destroyed themselves in nuclear fire long before the Alliance was formed. Their home system, Sol, was the heart of the dead zone. "It must be a trick," the tactical officer said. "The Devourers are trying to confuse us." But Zethkar wasn't so sure. He had studied the old texts, the ones most considered fairy tales. The descriptions of Terran ships matched what the sensors were showing. But how could it be possible? "Sir, they're requesting visual communication," the communications officer reported. "On screen," Zethkar ordered, though part of him feared what he might see. The view screen flickered to life, and every being on the bridge gasped. The creature on the screen was unlike anything in the Alliance. It stood on 2 legs with only 2 arms. Its skin was a pale brown with no scales, feathers, or fur for protection. Dark hair covered only the top of its head. By galactic standards, it looked fragile, almost helpless. But the eyes! The eyes held something that made Zethkar's heart skip a beat. There was an intensity there, a fierce determination that seemed almost predatory. "Commander Zethkar," the creature, Captain Chun, said, "I know this must be confusing, but there's no time for explanations. My fleet will engage the Devourers in 15 minutes. I strongly suggest you move your ships out of combat zone." "Your fleet?" Zethkar managed to ask. "How many ships do you have?" A small smile crossed the human's face. 12. 12 ships against a Devourer armada that had destroyed hundreds of Alliance vessels? It was madness. Captain Chun, I appreciate your courage, Zefkar said carefully, but you don't understand. The Devourers have technology beyond anything we've encountered. Our weapons can't even touch them. Your weapons can't, Chun replied. Ours can. Before Zefkar could respond, the sensor operator called out again. Sir, the Terran ships are accelerating. They're moving at... This can't be right. They're moving at 20% light speed and still accelerating. That was impossible. The amount of energy required for such acceleration would be astronomical, and the G-forces would liquefy any biological creature. How? The science officer whispered. On the screen, Captain Chen's smile widened slightly. We've had a long time to prepare, Commander. Longer than you might think. The human ships appeared on the tactical display, 12 small dots racing toward the massive Devourer fleet. They were outnumbered 100 to 1. Captain, this is suicide, Zefkar said. Please reconsider. Join us in retreat. We can try to mount defense at the sanctuary systems. With respect, Commander, we didn't come all this way to retreat. Chen's expression grew serious. We've been watching, waiting. When the Devourers first appeared at the edge of your galaxy, we began our preparations. We will not let them destroy what you've built. But why? Zefkar asked. If the legends are true, if you really are Terrans, why help us? Your species has been in isolation for millennia. Chin was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight of ages. Because we know what it's like to stand on the brink of extinction. We know the cost of war, the price of survival. We nearly destroyed ourselves once. We won't stand by and watch it happen to others. The Terran ships were now visible on the long-range visual sensors. They were unlike anything in the Alliance databases. Where Alliance ships were smooth and elegant, these were angular and aggressive. They looked like predators, built for one purpose: war. Captain Chun, what happened to your people? Zefkar asked. The histories say you destroyed yourselves. We almost did, Chin admitted. But almost isn't the same as completely. Those who survived learned from our mistakes. We rebuilt, but this time we built better. We established colonies throughout the dead zone. What you call dead, we call home. The radiation that kills other species, we adapted to it. The harsh conditions that make life impossible, we thrived in them. But why hide? Why let the galaxy think you were extinct? Because we were dangerous, Chin said simply. We needed time to change, to evolve beyond our violent nature. We needed to prove to ourselves that we could be better. So we watched, we waited, and we prepared. We knew this day would come, the day when the galaxy would face a threat it couldn't handle alone. The Devourer fleet had noticed the approaching Terran ships. Massive vessels, each one the size of a small moon, turned their attention to the new threat. Energy beams that had carved through Alliance dreadnoughts lanced out toward the human ships, and missed. The Terran vessels moved with impossible agility, dancing between the beams like leaves of storm. They accelerated and decelerated at rates that should have torn them apart, making turns that defied the laws of physics as the Alliance understood them. How are they doing that? The science officer breathed. Sir, I'm detecting massive gravitational anomalies around each Terran ship, the sensor operator reported. They're bending space-time around themselves. Zefkar felt his mind reel. Manipulating gravity on that scale was theoretically possible, but the energy requirements were beyond anything the Alliance had achieved. What other impossibilities had these humans mastered during their isolation? The Terran ships reached attack range, and Zefkar watched in awe as they struck. Beams of twisted space itself lashed out from the human vessels, hitting the Devourer ships with devastating effect. Where Alliance weapons had failed, these tore through the enemy's shields like paper. Devourer ships, seemingly invulnerable moments before, began to break apart. By the ancestors, someone whispered on the bridge. But the Devourers weren't helpless. They adapted quickly, their ships morphing and changing to counter the human attacks. What followed was a battle unlike anything the Alliance had ever witnessed. The Terran ships fought with a coordinated fury that was both terrifying and beautiful. They moved as one, each ship's actions perfectly complementing the others. "Commander, we're receiving telemetry from the battle," the tactical officer reported. "The Terran ships aren't just using gravity weapons. They're employing technologies we don't even have names for. Directed singularities, chrono-displacement fields, quantum phase disruptors." Zethkar watched the battle with a mixture of hope and fear. Hope that they might survive this day, and fear what these humans were capable of. The legends had spoken of their violence, their capacity for destruction, but they had also spoken of something else, their incredible ability to adapt, to survive, to overcome impossible odds. "Sir," the communications officer said, "Captain Chun is hailing us again." Chun appeared on the screen, her face calm despite the chaos of battle around her ship. "Commander, we've created an opening in their formation. If your ships concentrate fire on the coordinates we're sending, you might be able to do some damage." Zethkar didn't hesitate. "All ships, target the coordinates the Terrans are providing. Fire everything we have." The combined Alliance fleet opened fire, and this time their weapons found their mark. The Devourer ships, weakened by the Terran assault, began to take damage from conventional weapons. "It's working," the tactical officer shouted. "We're actually hurting them." But the battle was far from over. The Devourers, realizing they faced a real threat, began to consolidate their forces. Their ships merged together, forming larger and more powerful vessels. The space around them began to warp and twist as they brought their most devastating weapons online. "Captain Chun, they're preparing for a nova burst," Zethkar warned. "If they release that much energy, it will sterilize this entire system." "We see it," Chun replied calmly. "Don't worry, Commander. We prepared for this too." For the Terran ships broke formation, accelerating to speeds that shouldn't have been possible. They dove straight toward the charging Devourer weapon, their hulls glowing with accumulated energy. "No!" Zethkar breathed, understanding what they intended. "They're going to ram them." "Sometimes," Chin said quietly, "the old ways are the best ways." The four ships struck simultaneously, their impact releasing energies that lit up the entire system. The explosion was visible from planets light years away, a new star born and dying in the span of seconds. When the light faded, a quarter of the Devourer fleet was gone, along with the four brave Terran ships. "Did they?" The communications officer couldn't finish the question. "No escape pods," the sensor operator confirmed grimly. They knew it was a one-way trip. The remaining Terran ships pressed their attack with renewed fury. The loss of their comrades seemed to drive them to even greater feats of destruction. The Devourers, for the first time since their appearance, began to retreat. "They're falling back," someone shouted. "The Devourers are actually retreating." But Captain Chen's face showed no celebration. "This isn't over, Commander. They'll be back, and in greater numbers. But you bought time now. Time to prepare to adapt." She paused. "We'll leave you the technical specifications for some of our simple weapons. Study them, improve them, make them your own." "Captain, wait," Zethkar said. "Your people saved us. The Alliance owes you a debt that can never be repaid. Will you stay? Join us?" Chin shook her head. "Not yet. We're still too dangerous, Commander. We've learned to control our nature, but we haven't conquered it. Maybe someday, when we're ready, when you're ready for us." She smiled sadly. "Until then, know that you're not alone. We'll be watching, and if the darkness comes again, we'll be there." The transmission ended, and the Terran ships began to pull away. They accelerated rapidly, heading back toward the dead zone, back to their hidden worlds. "Sir," the communications officer said, "we're receiving massive data transmissions from the Terran ships. Technical manuals, scientific theories, weapon designs. It will take years to analyze all of this." Zethkar stared at the tactical display, watching as the human ships disappeared into a forbidden region of space. The Devourers were in full retreat, their seemingly invincible fleet reduced by half. The Alliance had survived, but at what cost? And what did the future hold now that humanity had revealed itself? Sir, what do we tell the Senate?